Hello students, we're back and we're ready to move on to our next lesson. Today you will learn how to solve proportions, which is the last part of of our our, our ratios, rates, unit rates, percents, and then proportions. Now a little quick review. Remember that a proportion is an equation stating that two ratios or rates are equivalent. Make this a little bigger. There we go. Okay, so remember with numbers here, we have a fraction equal to another fraction. And some of you guys already knew that we can solve a proportion using the cross product, which is what we're going to be learning today. Consider the following proportion. Okay, so we have some fraction equal to another fraction. If you multiply this times AD, which is right here, and you multiply BF, then those two things should equal each other. So then here, A times D, you just put it AD. And then B times C, it just turns into B times C, because you really don't know what those numbers are. So you just put them together. Remember that two letters together means multiplication. This means multiplication, multiplication. I'll put a dot there for multiplication. The products AD, this guy right here, and BC, this guy right here, are called cross products, right, of this proportion. The cross products of any proportion are equal, all right? If it is a proportion, this must be true. Let me set up a non-example, okay? So, non-example. If you have 3/4 equal to 5/8, all right? By using the cross product, you will find out. So if we multiply 3 times 8, that will give us 24. We bring down the equal sign, and then if you multiply the other cross here, 4 times 5, well, that happens to be 20. Well, in this case, the product that we did for AD is 24. And the product that we got for BC here happens to be 20. 24 equals to 20. Well, this can't be true. This is not true. Therefore, if the products of each other are not equal to each other, then this is not a proportion. Not a proportion. In the other hand, if you have a fraction, for example, 3/4 is equal to 12 over 16. Well, let's do the cross product here. So if we multiply the product of A and D, this one right here, so that will be 3 times 16, that's 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, 48. We bring down our equal sign, then we do the cross product of BC. Well, 12 times 4 times 12, well, that's 48. And then you check your cross products. The product of AD is equal to the product of BC. And if this is true, then you have yourself a proportion. So you can say that 3/4 and 6 are a proportion, and therefore they are proportional. All right, so let's go ahead and do an example. After 2 hours, the air temperature has risen 7. So after 2 hours, that's important, has risen, that means has gone up 7 degrees. Write and solve, so this is the actual instructions. Write and solve a proportion to determine the amount of time it will take at this rate for the temperature to rise an additional 13 minutes. So see how long will it take? So here it says, determine the amount of time it will take. So we want the amount of time. So we are looking for time. Do we know the amount of time? We don't. So we're going to have to give it a variable t. So we're going to let t equals time. This is some of your first notation when we start doing algebra, that some letter will always equal something. So in this case, we're going to let t, the letter t, equals time. So we write a proportion. It says here, write a proportion. Let t represent the time in hours. Well, look at that. Looks like I already did it right there. Okay? So we first take the first part that they've given us. So in this case, this is together. It says after 2 hours, the air temperature has risen 7 degrees. So 7 degrees will go on top, time will go on the bottom. Now from here, it really doesn't matter if you switch, if you put 7 to 2 or 2 to 7, because when you set up this other side, you'll have to set it up in the same manner as you did here. So for in this case, let's make sure that this one is your t and this one is your time. So temperature and time. Okay? So they say, well, 7 degrees in 2 hours. Well, how much would that be? How many degrees will it be in t hours? In how much time? Well, we really don't know this yet. So now this is where the cross product comes in really handy. Okay? Now, in this case, you won't find an actual number that equals to an actual number, but it will give you an equation. So I'm going to go ahead and solve all this over here on the side so we make things really clear. So 7 degrees over 2 is equal to 13 over the letter t, over time. So this represents temperature, this represents time. This represents temperature, this represents time. So they have to be corresponding. Now, if we use the cross product, we're going to multiply AD, remember? 7 times T. Well, since we don't know the value of T, all you can do is just combine them. 7 times T is just 7 times T. Then you bring down your equal sign, just like we do with cross products. And now you do your other cross product, B over C. Well, in this one, you actually get to multiply something. 2 times 13 happens to be 26. All right? So according to the cross product, these two quantities have to equal each other. But the only way they can equal each other now is if T, some number times T, times 7 gives you 26. So in order to find out what the value of T is, we're going back to to solving equations. If I want to solve for T, then I have to divide by 7, because 7 is being multiplied by T. So then in order to undo that, we divide by 7. Then we do it to both sides. In this case, the 7's cancel. Remember to bring your T down like before. And now you actually have to do this division. 26 divided by 7, that would be 3. 3 times 7 is 21. Remainder of 5. We add a decimal. We add a 0. Bring the decimal up. And then bring the 0 down. Well, how many times does 7 go into 50? That will be about 7 times. 7 times 7 is 49. Remainder 1. 50 minus 49 is 1. Okay, since I got a very small remainder here, I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. So you can see that now you could get your 3.7 and put it over here. So, oops, 3.7. Okay, so then we go back to the question. It says, write and solve a proportion, which we already did, to determine the amount of time it will take at this rate for the temperature to rise another 13 degrees? Well, we just found out that it's going to take about 3.7 hours for the temperature to rise 13 degrees more. And then you have to put it in a sentence form so you can make sense of the whole thing. So this is, it will take about 3.7 hours to rise an additional 13 degrees. And that's about it for that one. That's how you solve a proportion. When you're missing a value, you use the cross product the same way as you do, but and it ends up giving you an equation. Then you solve that equation for the variable that you have by doing opposite operations or inverse operations to get the value of that variable you want. So then the only way that these cross products are going to be equal, it's if t is 3.7. Okay, let's move on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do one of you got it problems here. I'm going to go ahead and do B. That way you guys can do A and C. So in this case, I have 2 to 34 is equal to 5 over y. All right, so since this part, we're going to start using the cross product. We're going to multiply 2 times y. That's going to give you 2 times y. You bring down your equal sign. Then we're going to multiply 34 times 5. So on the side, 34 times 5, that's 20. 3 times 5 is 15, 16, 17. So it's 170. Now, in order to solve for y here, you need to divide by 2. You need to divide by 2. This cancels, and y is going to equal whatever that division is. 170 divided by 2. 2 goes into 16, into 17, 8 times. 2 times 8 is 16. The remainder of 1. You bring down the 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 times 5 is 10. We have a remainder of 0. So then you can say that y is equal to 85 degrees. Not 85 degrees, just 85. In order for the cross products to be equal, y has to be equal to 85. And that's how you solve the proportions. So you guys do A and B, and let's move on to the next page. 171. Example number 2. If the ratio of type O to non-type O donors at a blood drive was 37 out of 43, how many donors would be type O out of 300 donors? Okay, so the first thing you need to know about this here is that you have to find the total of the donors for that particular day. And they give you the ratio here. So you would have to add 37 plus 43. That will give you 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 80. So there was a total of 80 donors. They were either type O or non-type O, right? So, and then they tell you the ratio of type O to, remember your 2? So they're comparing the type O to the non-type O. So then type O has to go on the top, or has to be first, and then non-type O. So if you see this ratio here, they show you 37 first, and they name type O first. So that means that the 37 is type O, and the 43, which is afterwards, 37 to 43, type O to non-type O, right? So these are non-type O. So then they ask you here, how many donors would be type O? This is how you find out. Since they were mentioned first to non-type O, then this one represents the type O. This is the non-type O. They should be, if this one is first, then this one is first. This one is second, then this one is second. And that's how you correlate. So then, oh, they already added it here for us. So 37 plus 43 is 80. So 37 out of 80 total donors, 37 were type O blood type. So now you can set up your proportion. you take this one right here, write a proportion, let T represent the number of type of donors. Let T represent the number of type O donors. So you're going to put here, let T equals type O donors. Okay? So then, if 37 out of 80 are type O, then how many type O's is going to be out of 300? Okay? So remember, since we put the type O's on top and the total number of donors on the bottom, then it has to be the type O over the total number of donors here. So this is what they gave us. They want to know how much would how many donors would be type O out of 300 donors. So that's how you know that since we put donors on the bottom, the total donors, you know that you have to put total donors on the bottom. So type O donors over total donors. Type O donors over total donors. And now you can use the cross product here to multiply. Let me go ahead and do it over here on the side. So first, 37 over 80 is equal to T over 300. So once again, we begin. Usually I prefer to always do the product that has the variable. That way your variable ends up on the left side where you can see that's more familiar. So 80 times T becomes 80 T, and that should equal 37 times 300. And in this case, they say 37 times 300 is 11,100. Right? Now, in order to solve for T, we need to divide by 80 on both sides. The 80s cancel. Bring down your variable. So 11,100 divided by 80. They did it for us right here already. That's 138.75. Okay? Now, what does that mean? What was T representing? Well, T was representing the type of donors. So that means that there's 138.75 type of donors. Now, you have to think very careful about this. Donors, you're talking about people. And people cannot be cut into decimals. So since you have a 138.75, this is also part of a person. So whenever you're talking about something that cannot be broken down, you have to round it to the next whole number. So in this case, T is going to equal 138.75. That's should be 139. So 139 type O donors. That's how it should look. All right, and that's the way we set up proportions using the cross product, and then you solve for the variable that you need to find out. Okay, so it's valid because we already know that the cross products, if this is going to be proportional, then the cross products have to be equal. If they're not equal, then you do not have a proportion. All right, let's move on. Example number 3. Don't forget to do your got it here. Use unit rates. Okay, on this one we don't really set up a proportion per se, but we're going to set up an equation. You can also use the unit rate to write an equation expressing relationships between two proportional quantities. Olivia bought 6 containers of yogurt for $7.68. So this is important. $7.68 for 6 containers. Write an equation relating the cost C to the number of yogurts Y. So already right here, you need to understand now, instead of writing big numbers in mathematics, we try to compress everything to the least possible thing we can do. So cost is now going to be the letter C, and yogurts is going to be the letter Y. how much would Olivia pay for 10 yogurts at this same rate? Well, just like before, first you got to set up this rate into a unit rate. So we're going to set it up $7.68 money over containers. 6 containers of yogurt. Let's put away for containers of yogurt. Okay? Now let's delete that. Determine the unit rate. Determine the unit rate between cost and containers of yogurt. Well, we all know that the unit rate has to have a denominator of 1. So then if you have 6 containers of yogurt, but you want to find out the amount for 1 container of yogurt, then you have to divide. So this divided by this will give you your, so we could set up a proportion like that too. So we go 6 times x, that's 6x, equal to $1 times 1 times $7.68 is just $7.68. And then from here, we divide by 6, we divide by 6, x is equal to, now when you do this division, 768 divided by 6, so be 1, 6, 1, decimal goes straight up, bring down the 6, 6 goes into 16 2 times, 6 is 12, this will be 4, bring down the 8, 6 goes into 48, 8 times, 6 times 8 is 48, remainder 0. So then we could say that x is equal to 128. So 128 is the actual unit rate, $1.28 for 1 container of yogurt. Okay? So now we can actually set up the equation. So we know that it costs $1.28 for the container of yogurts. The cost is 128 times the number of containers of yogurt. Okay, so in this case, $1.28 per container. So then they want to know for 10 containers of yogurt. Okay, so you could set up the cost is equal to the cost of 1 container of yogurt times the number of yogurts that you want. So then in this case, now that we set up the equation, we can actually substitute any number we want. If they ask you for 20 yogurts, 100 yogurts, 1,000,000 yogurts, you would just substitute that value into here and you would get the total cost for that amount. So in this case, for 10 yogurts, the cost would be $12.80. And then you put it back into English form. The cost for 10 containers of yogurt is $12.80. And that's another way that you can set up proportions and set up equations. Okay? Problem number 4. JC bought 8 gallons of gas for $31.12. Write an equation. This is important. Write an equation relating the cost C to the number of gallons G of gas. How much would JC pay for 11 gallons at the same rate? Well, remember, they gave us the rate up here already. So the first thing you have to do is set it up. We should set it up right here. $31.12 for 8 gallons. So you always want to know, you always want to convert everything into unit rates. That way you know how much it is for 1 gallon first. So the first thing you got to do is divide this. So when you divide that, you get $3.85 per gallon. So let's go ahead and divide this so you guys can know how the division looks like. 8 goes into 31 3 times. This is 24. 31 minus 24 is 7. Bring the decimal up. Bring the 1 down. 8 goes into 71. Eight times 8. 8 times 8 is 64. 71 minus 64 is 7. Bring down the 2. Alright. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 8 is 72. So it's going to be 9 times. 8 goes into 72 9 times. So then your answer is $3.89. When you divide this, you get $3.80 per gallon. Now that you know how much it is for 1 gallon, you could say, well, the cost is equal to $3.89 per gallon times the amount of gallons that we want to buy. So then you want 11 gallons. So you can substitute 11 in here. Okay? So then you would do the multiplication and you would get this answer here. So let's go ahead and do that multiplication. 389 times 11. 1 times 9, 8. 1 times 3 is 3. We're going to the next one. So next place value, add a 0. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 3 is 3. Notice that I did not touch the decimal at all. Not yet, that is. This will be 9. 9 plus 8 is 17. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Plus 1, this is 4. Now we go back and we check the decimal places. Here we have 1, 2 decimal places. So we put the same thing here, 1, 2. So it's 42.79, which is the same thing as that. Okay? Now these things, you have to do them on your own. So that's why this is this goes back to chapter 1 on your textbooks. All right? So that'll be it for this video. Make sure you take notes accordingly, and then tomorrow or the next day when we see each other, we do the fun stuff. Okay? Just make sure you have a good foundational understanding how to solve the proportions and how to use the cross product. See you next time.